But I heard him say it before I even stepped fully into the room. They're my real family now. The words hit me so hard I had to stop walking. For a second I thought I misunderstood. Maybe I heard wrong. Maybe there was more to the sentence. But then I saw the way everyone laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just enough to make it clear. This wasn't a joke. I stood in the doorway of that bright dining room holding the cake I had baked myself. My hands felt suddenly heavy. My chest tight. Daniel didn't look at me right away. He was standing beside Elena, one arm around her shoulders, smiling like he belonged there. Like he had always belonged there. Her parents sat at the head of the long table, proud and pleased. The kind of people who never had to ask for respect. They simply expected it. Then Daniel turned. For a split second our eyes met. And in that moment I saw it. Not guilt. Not even discomfort. Just indifference. "Mom," he said casually like nothing had happened. "You made it." I forced a small smile and stepped forward. "Yes," I said softly. "Of course I did." But something inside me had already gone quiet. The house was larger than anything I had ever stepped into. Tall ceilings. Polished floors. Glass walls that looked out over a perfect garden. Everything felt too clean, too arranged, like it was meant to be seen, not lived in. I placed the cake gently on the table. Elena's mother glanced at it and smiled politely. "Oh, how thoughtful," she said, her voice smooth but distant. No one reached for it. A woman in a white uniform carried in a tray of desserts that looked like they came from a magazine. Small, perfect, untouched. I stepped back, folding my hands in front of me. Daniel was already laughing with Elena's father, talking about business, about opportunities, about things he had never discussed with me before. It felt like I was watching someone else's life. "Sit anywhere," Elena said, not unkindly but not warmly either. I chose a seat near the end of the table. Far enough to not interrupt. Close enough to hear everything. The conversation flowed around me, fast and confident. Names of places, people, deals. I recognized none of them. At one point someone asked Daniel how he managed everything so well. He smiled. "I learned quickly," he said. I waited. Just a small pause. Just a mention. But he didn't look at me. And he didn't say anything else. 3. Dinner went on like I wasn't there. Plates were passed. Glasses were filled. Laughter rose and fell like waves. Every now and then someone would glance at me as if trying to place where I fit. I kept my posture straight and my voice quiet. When spoken to, I answered politely. Short. Simple. Careful not to take up too much space. Elena's father leaned back in his chair, watching Daniel with approval. "You've adapted well," he said. "Not everyone can step into a higher circle so smoothly." I felt the words more than I heard them. Daniel nodded. "You do what you have to do," he replied. "You grow." His tone was light, but something about it made my chest tighten. Grow. As if growth meant leaving something behind. Or someone. Elena smiled at him, her hand resting on his arm like she was proud of what he had become. No one asked where he came from. No one asked who helped him get there. I looked down at my plate, barely touched. The cake still sat untouched at the center of the table. Perfect. Unnoticed. And I realized then very quietly that I didn't belong in that room. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because they had already decided I wasn't needed. After dinner, people moved into the living room. Soft music played somewhere in the background. Glasses clinked. Conversations split into smaller groups. I stood near the window for a while, watching the garden lights flicker on one by one. Daniel didn't come to me. Not once. I told myself he was busy. That he was hosting. That this was important to him. Still, a small part of me waited. Just a minute. Just a few words. "Are you comfortable? Did you eat? Anything?" But it didn't come. Instead, Elena's mother approached me with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must be proud," she said. I nodded. "I am." She tilted her head slightly. "Daniel has done very well for himself. It's not easy to transition into a different lifestyle." There was again. Different. I held her gaze, calm and steady. "He's worked hard," I said. She gave a soft laugh. "Yes. Hard work matters. But so does environment." Her eyes flicked briefly around the room. I understood what she meant. And I understood what she didn't say. I smiled politely. "Yes," I said. It does. I left earlier than I had planned. No one stopped me. Elena was busy saying goodbye to guests. Her parents were deep in conversation. The room was still full of voices that didn't include mine. Daniel walked me to the door. Leaving already? He asked, checking his phone as he spoke. I have an early morning, I said. It wasn't a lie. Just not the real reason. He nodded. All right. There was a pause. I waited. Maybe now. Maybe he would say something. Ask something. Notice something. Instead he smiled lightly. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Like I was a guest. Like I hadn't spent years making sure he had somewhere to go, something to build on, someone to rely on. I looked at him carefully. At the man he had become. So polished. So confident. So far away. I'm glad you're happy, I said softly. He didn't hear what I meant. Of course I am, he replied. I nodded once. Then I stepped outside. The night air felt cooler than I expected. As I walked to my car, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't explain. I wouldn't remind him of anything. I would simply step back and let life speak for me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had to, because I couldn't sleep. Daniel's words stayed with me. Not loud anymore. Just steady. Sitting somewhere deep like they had found a place to stay. They're my real family now. I made my coffee the same way I always did. 1 spoon of sugar. Little milk. I sat by the window and watched the street slowly come to life. Everything felt normal. And yet nothing was. My phone buzzed once. A message from Daniel. Did you get home safe? I looked at it for a long time. Then I typed back. Yes. Sleep well. Short. Simple. No extra words. That was the first change. Small enough that he wouldn't notice. But clear enough that I would. Later that morning, I opened my laptop and reviewed my monthly transfers. There they were. Quiet payments. Regular. Unnoticed. Support for things Daniel never mentioned. I hovered over one of them. Then I clicked. Cancel. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I just moved through each one calmly. One by one. 7. Daniel had always believed he managed everything on his own. I never corrected him. It wasn't pride that kept me silent. It was peace. Some truths don't need to be spoken to exist. I had helped where I could when I could. Quietly. Without making it a burden. A portion of his office rent. A supplier he thought he found himself. A short-term gap I filled when a deal was delayed. Nothing dramatic. Just small supports that kept things steady. Invisible but important. That afternoon, I received a notification from my bank. Final confirmation. All recurring transfers had stopped. I closed the message and placed my phone face down. There was no anger in me. No desire to prove anything. Just a quiet boundary. If he believed he had outgrown me, then I would let him stand fully on his own. Not as punishment. As truth. My phone rang later that evening. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey Mom, he said. Quick question. Did that contact you mentioned last month ever reply? I leaned back in my chair. No, I said calmly. I didn't follow up. There was a pause. Oh, he said. All right. And just like that, something shifted. The days passed quietly. No arguments. No tension. No dramatic silence. Just space. Daniel still called, but less often. When he did, the conversation stayed light. Work, weather. Small updates. Nothing real. Nothing deep. I didn't push. I didn't ask questions he wasn't ready to answer. But I also didn't fill the gaps anymore. One evening he mentioned something in passing. Things are a bit tight this week, he said casually. Just a timing issue. I stirred my tea slowly. Before I would have asked more. Before I would have checked. Before I would have fixed it without him even knowing. This time I simply nodded even though he couldn't see me. That happens, I said gently. He laughed. Yeah. I've got it under control. I'm sure you do, I replied. And I meant it. Or at least I allowed him to believe it. After we hung up, I sat there for a while. Not thinking. Just feeling the quiet settle around me. This wasn't distance. This was clarity. 9. A week later I saw the first crack. It was small. Easy to miss. Daniel called earlier than usual. His voice sounded the same, but something underneath it felt rushed. Hey, he said. Quick thing, do you still have that contact in logistics? The one you mentioned months ago. I recognized the question immediately. It wasn't new. Only now it carried weight. I haven't spoken to them recently, I said. There was a pause. Oh, he replied. I thought maybe you could reconnect me. I looked out the window watching a car pass slowly down the street. I think it's better if you reach out directly, I said. It'll mean more coming from you. Silence. Not long. But enough. Right, he said. Yeah, that makes sense. His tone shifted quickly after that, back to normal. Back to light. But I had heard it. That small moment of uncertainty. That slight imbalance. After we ended the call, I didn't feel satisfaction. Only confirmation. Reality doesn't arrive all at once. It begins quietly. Like this. 2 weeks after the dinner, Daniel stopped by unexpectedly. That alone told me something had changed. He used to plan everything. Now he stood at my door, hands in his pockets, smile just a little too quick. Hey, he said. I was nearby. I stepped aside and let him in. Of course. He looked around the apartment like he hadn't seen it in a long time. Everything was the same. But to him maybe it felt different. Simpler. Quieter. Smaller. Want some coffee? I asked. Sure, he said. We sat across from each other at the table. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he cleared his throat. Things have been a bit unpredictable lately, he admitted. I nodded, listening. He continued, a couple of deals didn't go through. Nothing serious. Just timing. I watched him carefully. This wasn't a request. Not yet. Just an opening. I see, I said softly. He looked at me as if expecting something more. Advice. Solutions. Reassurance. I gave him none of those. Only presence. You'll figure it out, I said. And for the first time he didn't look completely sure. 11. The first real crack showed up on a rainy Thursday. Daniel called me late in the evening, his voice tight. Mom, do you know anything about the internet bill at the house? Kept my tone calm. Which house? Our house, he said quickly. The one you helped us set up. I paid the first year in advance, I replied. After that it switches to the account holder. Silence. Then softer, it got cut off today. I pictured him standing in that big living room, phone in hand, finally noticing something missing. I'm sure you'll sort it out, I said gently. He let out a short breath. Yeah. Of course. He hung up soon after, but I didn't move from my chair. It had begun. The quiet support he never noticed was starting to fade. And for the first time he noticed the absence. 12. 2 days later the second call came. This time it was shorter. Mom, quick question, Daniel said. The cleaning service. Did you cancel them? I folded the dish towel slowly before answering. No. I only scheduled them for the first 6 months. Another pause. They didn't come this week, he muttered. They fulfilled the agreement, I said. Anything after that is up to you. I could hear voices in the background, sharp, annoyed. Lena. They said it's too expensive, Daniel added almost to himself. I said nothing. For years, I had quietly removed stress from his life before it ever reached him. Now he was meeting it face to face. Well, we'll figure it out, he said quickly as if convincing himself. I'm sure you will, I replied. After we hung up, I stared at the empty kitchen. There was no anger in me. Only a strange, steady calm. He was learning. Not from my words. But from my absence. The third shift came quietly without a phone call. I heard about it from someone else. A neighbor from Daniel's street stopped me at the store. Your son moved his car, right? She asked casually. It was parked outside for days. I smiled faintly. I'm not sure. Oh, she said. Looked like it had a flat tire. I nodded and walked away, but something in my chest tightened. That car. I had been covering the maintenance plan without telling him. Every oil change. Every tire. Every small repair. Until recently. I went home and sat by the window. For a moment I thought about calling him. Just to ask. Just to check. But I didn't. If I stepped in now, I would undo everything. He needed to feel the weight of his own life. Not just the comfort of it. And so I stayed quiet. The messages started coming after that. Not calls. Texts. Short. Careful. Different. Hey Mom, do you remember which insurance company you used for the house? I read it twice before answering. I gave you all the documents when you moved in. A few minutes passed. Yeah. I'll check again. Another message came later that night. Do you know when the property tax is due? I leaned back in my chair. These were things he had never asked before. Guess he never needed to. It's in the file folder labeled Home, I replied. A long pause. Then, got it. Thanks. No emojis. No casual tone. Just careful words. Like he was stepping into a world he didn't fully understand. And for the first time I realized something. He wasn't just losing support. He was losing certainty. 15. A week later he showed up at my door. I knew something had changed the moment I saw him. His shoulders were lower. His eyes tired. Hi Mom, he said, standing there like a stranger. I stepped aside. Come in. He walked in slowly, looking around like he hadn't been there in years. We sat at the kitchen table. Neither of us spoke at first. Then he sighed. Things are harder than I thought. I waited. He rubbed his hands together. Bills, repairs, everything. It just keeps coming. I nodded once. That's how it works. He gave a small, uneasy laugh. Yeah. I guess I never noticed before. Well, he didn't. I thought it was all just normal, he admitted. It was normal, I said softly. Because I made it that way. He looked up at me then. Really looked. And for the first time in a long time, I saw doubt in his eyes. Not about me. About everything he thought he understood. 16. Daniel stayed for almost an hour that day. At first, the conversation stayed on the surface. Bills, repairs, small frustrations. But underneath I could feel something shifting. I didn't realize how much things cost, he admitted, staring at the table. Everything adds up so fast. I nodded. It always has. He glanced up. Why didn't you ever say anything? I thought about that. Because you never asked. Because you didn't want to know. But I didn't say that. You had enough on your plate, I replied simply. He leaned back, rubbing his face. Elena's parents. They keep saying we should manage better. That it's basic stuff. I said nothing. He let out a quiet laugh, but it wasn't amused. It doesn't feel basic. No, I said softly. It never is at the beginning. He looked at me again like he was trying to understand something deeper. But he wasn't there yet. Not fully. When he left, he hugged me, brief, awkward. Different. And as the door closed, I felt it again. That quiet shift. He was starting to see. 17. The next change came faster than I expected. 3 days later, Daniel called again, but this time his voice was strained. Mom. The heater stopped working. I closed my eyes for a second. Winter had just begun to settle in. Did you call someone? I asked. Yeah, he said. But the repair cost is a lot. I waited. I thought there was a warranty or something, he added. There was, I said. For the first year. Another silence. Then quieter, right? I could hear tension in the background again, voices sharper now. Arguments that weren't there before. We might have to borrow money, he said almost under his breath. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I didn't care. But because I knew what this moment meant. For years I had been the safety net he never saw. And now there was nothing beneath him. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said gently. He didn't argue. Didn't push. Just said, yeah, okay. When the call ended, I sat still for a long time. This wasn't easy to watch. But it was necessary. A week passed before I heard from him again. This time he didn't call. He showed up. But something was different. He looked thinner. Tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Can I come in? He asked quietly. You don't have to ask, I said. He stepped inside, slower than before. We sat in the same kitchen at the same table. But the air felt heavier. Elena and we've been arguing a lot, he said. I didn't interrupt. She thought things would be easier, he continued. Her parents said we'd be fine. That we had everything we needed. He laughed bitterly. Turns out, we didn't even know what we needed. I folded my hands together. Her parents don't help? I asked carefully. He hesitated. They help in their way, he said. Advice. Opinions. Expectations. But not support. I could hear it even if he didn't say it. He looked at me, his voice quieter now. Did you ever feel like this? When I was younger. I smiled faintly. Every day, I said. He blinked. Like he had never imagined that. That night stayed with me long after he left. Not because of what he said, but because of what he finally understood. For the first time, Daniel wasn't speaking as a son who expected. He was speaking as someone who was struggling. The next morning I found myself standing in the hallway looking at an old photo. Daniel as a boy. Smiling. Carefree. Safe. I had built that safety for him. Layer by layer. Quietly. And now I had stepped back. Not out of anger. But out of necessity. My phone buzzed. A message from him. Mom. Thank you for yesterday. I read it twice. Simple. But different. You're welcome, I replied. Then after a moment I added. You'll get through this. He didn't respond right away. But I knew he saw it. And for the first time, I think he believed it. Funny. The real turning point came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks later Daniel called again, but this time his voice was calm. Tired. But steady. Mom, we had to sell the car. I closed my eyes briefly. That must have been hard, I said. Yeah, he admitted. But we needed the money. There was no panic in his voice this time. No frustration. Just acceptance. We're budgeting now, he continued. Cutting things down. Trying to understand where everything goes. I listened quietly. I'm struggling with it, he added. She's not used to this. I wasn't surprised. And you? I asked. He paused. I'm learning, he said slowly. I don't like it. But I get it now. A small silence followed. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. I didn't realize how much you carried all those years. I didn't speak. Because this wasn't a moment for words. It was a moment for truth. But finally, he was seeing it. 21. A few days later, Daniel came to see me again. This time he didn't knock right away. I saw him through the window standing still like he was gathering the courage to step inside. When I opened the door he looked different. Not just tired. Changed. Mom, he said quietly. I stepped aside. Come in. He didn't sit immediately. Instead he stood in the middle of the room looking around like he was seeing everything for the first time. I need to say something, he began. I waited. I was wrong. The words came out slow. Careful. Heavy. I thought I had everything figured out, he continued. I thought I didn't need this. You. I didn't interrupt. I said things I shouldn't have said, he added, his voice lower now. About family. The room felt very still. I didn't understand what family actually means, he said. And for the first time since that night, I saw regret in his eyes. Not shallow. Not quick. I motioned for him to sit. He did slowly, like the weight of everything had finally caught up to him. Elena and I, he hesitated. We're not doing well. I listened. She doesn't understand why things changed so fast, he said. Her parents keep saying we made mistakes. That we should have planned better. He let out a quiet breath. But they're not helping, he added. Not really. I nodded slightly. They helped in the beginning, he continued. But it came with conditions. Expectations. Pressure. I already knew. They don't see me the same way anymore, he admitted. Silence settled between us. And you? I asked gently. He looked down. I don't see myself the same way either. That was the truth. Not the money. Not the house. Not the comfort. Him. He had lost the version of himself he thought he was. And now he had to rebuild it. 23. I kept thinking about that night, Daniel said after a while. I didn't need to ask which one. The dinner, he added anyway. What I said. I stayed quiet. I didn't mean it the way it sounded, he said quickly. I was trying to fit in. To belong. I looked at him calmly. And did you? I asked. He shook his head slowly. No. The answer came without hesitation. I thought if I became more like them things would be easier, he continued. Better. He let out a soft, bitter laugh. But I just lost myself instead. I watched him carefully. And me? I asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, I pushed you away. Not because I told him. but because he finally saw it. I didn't realize what you were doing for me, he added. Not just the money. Everything. I nodded once. You made things feel easy, he said. So I thought they were. That was the truth. 24. We sat there for a long time after that. No rush. No pressure. Just honesty. Mom, he said finally, I don't expect you to fix anything. That mattered. I know I have to handle my life, he continued. By choices. I looked at him steady. Yes, I said. You do. He nodded. But I don't want to lose you, he added. There was not a request for money. Not a solution. Just a connection. I took a slow breath. You didn't lose me, I said softly. I stepped back. He held my gaze. I know, he said. And I understand why. That was enough for now. I won't step in the way I used to, I continued. That part is over. He nodded again. I don't need that, he said quietly. I believed him. But I'm still here, I added. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Not everything fixed. Not everything restored. But something real had begun again. 25. Life didn't suddenly become easy after that. Daniel still had problems to solve. Bills to manage. A relationship to repair, or possibly let go. But he faced them differently now. Not with pride. Not with assumptions. But with understanding. He started calling more often. Not for help. For conversation. For advice. For connection. And sometimes just to listen. Elena remained distant at first. Struggling with the changes. But Daniel didn't try to hide from reality anymore. He faced it. Step by step. As for me, I kept my promise. I didn't step back into his life the way I once had. I didn't carry things for him. But I stood beside him. Quiet. Steady. Present. One evening as we sat together, he said something I will never forget. I know what real family means now. I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't need to. Because this time, he didn't say it to impress anyone. He said it because he finally understood. And that made all the difference.